Welcome to the Real Estate Brothers podcast. I'm Bridger Christensen, your co-host with
Ethan Christensen.
And we are here today with none other than our good buddy, Matt Strong. Welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Good to have you here.
Yeah. I have a quick bio I want to read about him because it's impressive, honestly. So Matt Strong is the owner of Sierra West Funding, which provides quick funding for short-term real estate projects, typically fix and flips or other single-family investments. Since 2011, he has funded over 1,300 transactions and $380 million in volume. Matt got his start in real estate in 2004 by actively buying and selling his own properties, and has purchased and resold over 425 single-family homes in Utah by utilizing value-add strategies, typically known as fix and flips. Matt is also an active buy and hold investor and received a Master's of Real Estate Development from the MRED at the University of Utah in 2015, and a Bachelor of Science in Finance with an emphasis in real estate from the University of Utah in 2001. In addition to the MRED degree, Matt is an active real estate broker and loan officer here in Utah.
Oof.
It's impressive.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, when you've been doing it 20 years, it adds up a little bit.
No, that's awesome. And Matt is, if you're in Utah, Matt is one of the most known real estate hard money lenders, right?
I hope to be out there doing things. So yeah,
You are for sure. And I've got to say, Matt, like you're one of the best guys you'll ever meet. You're always so kind. You're always so gracious. We were at lunch before this, and all he was doing is asking questions about us and like what we got going on. What are you guys doing? What's this? I mean, such a high level of success. There's no bragging. He's so humble, willing to teach and willing to help. And he's been a fantastic partner on the office building that we had purchased, I don't know,
18 months ago?
Yeah. About 18 months ago. But we've learned so much from Matt. And when you think about bringing on a powerhouse to your podcast to hype it up and make it look good, we're like, man, we could go, but like we got to get Matt on. I mean, he's one of the first guys you think of.
No,
so.
You guys are awesome. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. No, and I feel like our journey within real estate, specifically when we started flipping, you were the first person we ever reached out to for hard money. And
isn't that funny? Because I don't always know. So
Yeah.
it's like, these guys seem like they know what they're doing.
yeah, I think it was just a really, really good deal. So you're like, all right, let's do it.
Well, I remember that one turned out. You guys crushed that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of your first ones.
Couldn't have bought better.
Yeah. We made more money on that house than what we paid for it.
That's
To put it in perspective.
Crazy.
I'm sure you guys have shared, but like the quality of the remodel, the execution of it's what got it there. Yeah, there's luck, but in timing.
Yeah.
But
And it's, and that's kind of where we got the bug into wanting to do more flips and stuff like that. And you've always been our go-to hard money lender.
I love it.
And like Ethan had mentioned, if you know Matt, he is the kind of person that, would give the shirt off your back to somebody. You're just a good guy.
well, it depends on if I have a backup shirt.
No, that's great. But let's dive into your story, how you got your start within real estate and kind of what that looked like.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go through this kind of quick, but I don't know. I still kind of joke like I can't wait to know what I'm going to do when I grow up because I just kind of fell into it. When I was at the University of Utah, the finance always made sense to me. I always was looking at numbers, future value of money, present value of money, how interest rates affect, your current and future dollars. And then real estate made sense too, because thinking back now, my uncle kind of guest taught one of the real estate classes. So I'm like, well, I'll just do that. So that was kind of my intro into real estate. But then I was working for a company that does self-directed health plans. And I mention this because it is important about the relationships that you create over the years. So the guy I worked for back then, he was so great. And I started working for him and kind of in a sales role. Finally had enough money to go buy a house. So it's ironic now that I'm flipping houses because the last thing I wanted to do was get an old house, even though that maybe probably would have been a better equity play.
Sure.
So I just was like, where can I get a brand new house that we can afford? Because I don't want to fix anything. So we ended up in Rose Park at an Ivory Homes community, and I didn't know nothing. I didn't know anything about real estate. And so I was like, well, if I don't have an agent, will you give me a discount? And they're like, no, but if you're an agent, we'll pay a commission. And I'm like, oh, I'm an agent. You know, I didn't have my license, but I got my license before I closed on the house. So that was like my first house, and it was our first property we bought as as our own house with no money down. Because the seller was doing pay your closing costs. I used my commission that I just earned to credit my FHA down payment. So then I was like, well, this was so easy. How much money did you guys make sitting here in this model home? And he told me, and I'm like, can I get an interview? So I got it. Then next thing I knew, I was working for Ivory Homes selling, real estate out of their model home, which was awesome. Ivory's such an amazing company. But for me, I just knew it was if I was going to be in that office too much longer, I was going to go brain dead. It just wasn't stimulating enough, but the money was good enough at that age that I'm like, crap, what in the world am I going to do to replace this? And then a buddy from high school was starting to represent people that are buying bank-owned houses. So he's like, do you want to try a flip? And I'm like, yeah, let's try it. So that was my first getting into flipping. Was kind of like I got into the model home. I was like, sure, let's just give this a shot.
About what year was that?
I bought my first flip in 2004.
Okay.
And how old
So
were you
20
then?
years ago. I just turned 48. So I was like 28, 27.
Okay.
Cool.
So I worked at Ivory for full 4 years. And then I did like 3 or 4 flips before I pulled the ripcord and quit Ivory because it was like, okay,
Yeah.
this could work, And so then, long story short, we flipped, and we'll talk about some of the trouble we got into in 2008, 2009 by flipping, raising money from private guys. I come back to that relationship because I learned so much from my boss at that time. He was so gracious when I'm like, dude, I think I need to quit to go work somewhere else. He's like, hey, if that's what's best for you, go for it. Like he was just so abundant thinking. It wasn't like all upset that I was leaving. Maybe he wanted me to leave and he's like, good, get out of here, But anyway, I reached back out to him. He's now been one of my main mentors, investors for the last 16 years. So it's like, don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
And be transparent and straight up with people. So borrowing private money from my different contacts that we were, to raise just for our own flips, that naturally turned into people asking me, hey, where are you getting your money? And I had thankfully had a little bit in my self-directed IRA by then, like 60 or 70,000 bucks. And I'm like, yeah, let's start doing these little loans. And for the first couple of years, it was kind of pro bono because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, it was kind of cool to just hook people up.
Yeah.
So then that's when the hard money in 2010, my first hard money loan was in 2010, but really didn't take it too serious for a couple years. And then I'd say for the last 8-9 years, like the hard money is my main, income. I still flip. We were talking right before. I always like to have 4 or 5 flips going on, some small developments, and then just like we own that office building together, a bunch of other rentals.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's great. I mean, what a story. I loved one thing that a lot of people I feel like struggle with is taking that leap of faith and just kind of going out on your own if that's their desire, I guess, and for you it obviously was.
But that was I mean, you guys have been there.
Yeah.
Because once I got into Ivory, that even though it was all commission based, they marketed so well and they had such good locations that if you were just kind of like half awake, you're going to sell a lot of houses. Like I always joke, like, dude, it's like I'm selling Nordstrom's pants. They're just houses. Because it really wasn't real estate. It was like, do you want this floor plan on this lot?
Yeah.
It's like, do you like the blue jeans or the white jeans? Okay, we'll go with the white ones, So you didn't, but your point of like, but it was scary getting out. I was more nervous getting out to flipping because by then I had 2 kids, a new house, 2 new cars. It's like, cause I got used to what I was making. So I was like, oh man, you can't go backwards, but I've noticed over the years, and it's like, once you feel in your gut that it seems about right, like, and maybe it's just my personality. It's like, you say yes, and then you kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'd say, 10, 15% of the time, that is a complete wrong decision to say yes, but it's good to fail, man. You got to
Yeah.
that's
forward.
the only way you figure it out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Going back to failures, failures, hard times, because everybody knows 2008, 9 was a hard time within real estate. How were you affected by that? And I feel like a lot of people who are watching this and listening to this probably haven't had your level of success. And so it might be hard for them to, relate, but everybody can relate to, going through hard times. So take us back to 2008, 2009 and how you were affected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before leading into that, whatever training or, workshops or presentations I can do on how to make money, I could probably teach an even longer one about how to completely screw up, I mean, we were just even talking, even just right now, I'm going to lose money on a townhome deal that, you'd think you'd maybe have these things figured out. But 2008, 2009, for me, that was really the first time you were staring down the barrel of well, wait, it's not always good. And I lost money on some flips, but nothing big, I've added up. I try to track everything. I easily lose money on 10% of the flips that I do. I mean, I added it up. It's reaching $700,000 to $800,000 in losses over the years in flipping. And I like keeping track of all of it because it's a good reminder,
Oh yeah.
to learn. But 2008, 2009, I think the reason that got off the rails for us was, and I think it's the same as true today, we had short-term money, hard money on land development and spec homes that, looking back now, we had no business doing because they were our first projects. They were bigger than the flips, and our fuse, we ran out of time where we had to. Basically, the short version is we had a 10-unit townhome development in Mill Creek that we hadn't properly locked up the neighboring land with a land partner, but we were so excited we closed on our land. Wasn't entitled, wasn't anything. It was the dumbest thing you could do because we completely overpaid for what the as-is value of the land would be if you couldn't develop it. Now, thankfully, I was able to refinance out my hard money and put a regular bank loan, because you got to remember back then, anyone and everyone could get a loan for whatever amount they wanted if you just were halfway alive. So I had this townhome project that I was trying to get through the city of Mill Creek. You're putting out all sorts of money. It's my first time doing it. You never quite know what you're really doing. And then at the same time, we were building 3 spec homes in Sandy that we thought were great. That was a great idea, And at the end of the day, the market just shut off. And, long story short, ended up having, in June, I still remember it, June 29, 2009, my name, because I, at the time, was the most organized to get these loans in our partnership. So it was my name and my credit on the line. And it's always a weird feeling when you're down at the auction a couple years before bidding on properties, and then your name's on one that's going to auction.
Yeah.
And so that was a dark time. I remember going and sitting down, and this helped me a lot in my lending with the bank president at a local credit union that had the loans on the spec homes we were doing. And you could just tell that guy they were just getting bombarded with deals going bad. And his name was Bob Parks. And I'll never forget him because we sat down and he's like, most people don't come and talk to me, so I give you guys a lot of credit. And he's like, the end of the day, we know we're going to lose money and you guys are going to lose money. But if you'll help just finish these houses, because they're about halfway done. He's like, you guys are going to make no money. You're never going to get paid a commission. But if you'll just be responsible enough to finish off these houses, we'll keep funding the draws. And so it was like,
Wow,
oh,
that's awesome.
it was awesome because we could kind of save face a little bit. We still lost a ton of money on them. And the bank lost money, but we actually helped the bank lose less money by being their boots on the ground to execute on the project. Yeah. So that means so much to me now as I'm a lender, and, people come with deals and stuff and they're like, hey, I'm stuck. How do I get out of this? And I'm thinking as the lender, well, it's I'd rather you finish the project than me. So, I mean, we do it all the time where we'll feed more money to a deal just to get it done. because there's a lot of value, so I guess maybe a lot of empathy, and I learned a ton from him. And then, that was dark. I started to look for another job. I was interviewing, and for me, the way I was made up, I'm like, I thought for a minute, like getting a W-2 job would sound safe, but it's like, this is not me. Yeah. And I don't know how you guys are out there, if you're married or have a partner or girlfriend or something, but my role in our family, we'd been married 10 years by then, probably. No, not that long. 6 or 7 years. I don't know. No, about 10 years actually. I always have kind of, and still do, like the finance, and my wife's great because she trusts me. So I don't always like filling in all the details, but I just had that moment where I was like broke down, and I'm like, okay, I better tell you, like we could be broke quickly. And, her response back to me was like, well, I made the joke of like, I think we could be living in the Tahoe, and we had a Tahoe back then. And by then we had our third kid, who's now 16. And she's like, yeah, that'd be okay. And I'm like, wait a second. What? I'm like, oh, I guess it would be okay.
That's a good wife.
And we were so far away from that in reality that it's like, well, that's really probably not going to happen. But if it does, so it was a mental shift for me where like, instead of focusing on the doom and the gloom, which was just so easy to do because you just felt like you were kicking yourself and getting kicked in the market. You watch the news and you see people losing their houses every day. But the big shift was like the opportunity even then was still there. I just didn't see it because I was so wrapped up in my own doom and gloom that kind of triggered looking for the light and looking for solutions. And honestly, after that, the fear and anxiety went away and we just went back to buying houses.
I was going to say, I think from what you had mentioned previously, that was one of your best times right after
the
that,
year
right?
After was my best year ever.
That's awesome.
So what did you do different? Were there any different strategies? Did your underwriting change? I think, was your exit strategy different in any way?
Well, part of it, the reason why, the market sucked was also benefiting us because now banks had all this inventory and they were in a way different spot where they're like, crap, how do we deal with all this? So so did our strategy change? Yes. We got afraid of those bigger deals and because I didn't lose any money flipping during the downturn. It was just getting caught up in these bigger deals for me that I hadn't had experience with at the wrong time with the wrong money. And so it's like, let's just go back to our base hit West Valley, Kearns. And unfortunately, a lot of people there were losing their houses because, the economy was bad and stuff like that. And so I think it was so much more in between your head though, because I think those opportunities even were there, even though, prices bottomed in like 2011, but we started buying like in 2010 as they were still going down, and so there was so much value in just going back to the bread and butter. Because the other thing that is so great about America, and hopefully it won't change, is housing is such a big piece and ownership. So what we realized really quick was prices were cheaper than they'd ever been for a lot of people. And most people buying our houses, they didn't even know what the stock market was. Yeah. They were just all of a sudden now making $13-14 an hour and rather live than rent. They didn't have the trauma and the history of like a failed, they were just like, oh, this is a nice remodeled house. We can afford it. The FHA loan program was super strong. There were incentives for first-time home buyers to kind of like bring the real estate back up. So part of it was dumb luck that we just, as bad a timing as we had to be in it at the peak, we also were so lucky to be in the game when it bottomed. And I don't know if there was ever an easier time to buy distressed properties than back then for that 4 or 5 or 6 year period. My day every day was like, wake up, get on the MLS, go look at 4 or 5 properties. You're guaranteed to get 2 of them.
Jeez.
And as an agent, you would get paid to buy your own house and you'd have due diligence.
That's crazy.
It was like, looking back now is like, why didn't we buy a gazillion more? But we were also trying to dig out of a hole and we were still a little risk adverse. But the other lesson is we never We communicate with our lenders when things were going bad. Even the bank that foreclosed on me, it was New Horizon, who was like a division of Countrywide. And if any was around that time, like those guys, they couldn't even respond. I sent letters, emails, voicemails, just saying, please work with me on this. And finally, I'm just like, oh, this was a business deal. If you want to come after me for whatever, they wouldn't even respond back to me for like a work, because they were just so overwhelmed. But the private money, I never lost a penny of that, paid everybody back. So those private or hard money lenders, they were right there with us when we're like, hey, this is our plan. We're going back. So we went, so those next 4 or 5 years, it was like, we were flipping like 60 houses a year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's a lot.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun, but it was coming off of like, a lot of not so fun.
Sure.
What would you say? Obviously prices were a lot different back then, but if you're buying in Salt Lake County, Kearns, West Valley, what was your average purchase price, sale, profit? What were you shooting for with stuff like that? So
small margins, because you couldn't have that big of margins because your purchase prices were so thin. So one cool example. So my average, I think for those years was like, we'd average a net profit after all expenses, 15 to 25,000 a house. Okay. But it's probably more like 20 a house.
Sure.
These days you're like, that's like what you're paying commissions on a deal. But last year I bought for the second time, the second house I ever flipped, I rebought like 18 years later.
Love it. Wow.
Just last year. So that one, it was in Kearns and Hoffman Heights. I should have kept my notes. I've talked about this before and someone's going to maybe call me out on it, but it was like an $87,000 purchase price. Flipped it, sold it for like $135,000. I mean, back then our rehab budget was like 10, 15 grand.
Yeah.
So we still made like 20 grand, even though the spread was like
nothing.
40. Yeah. Rebought that same house in pretty much the same condition I sold it in for $287 and ended up selling it for like $415.
That's awesome.
Oh man.
The same stinking house. So a couple lessons there, like over time, if you have good financing and a good loan, and you're in a market where you have good demographics, you have, good demand over time, that just shows you the power of owning real estate. How hard would it be for your average person to save that much money over that 18 years versus getting a loan, putting a little bit down and just renting it out, which I didn't do, but it would have been kind of the same thing. So yeah, prices back then, Kearns, like we were buying stuff consistently, sometimes in Tooele as low as 30 or 40,000, rarely over 100.
Yeah.
Back when things bottomed. And we really liked the smaller houses. Now I like doing a little bit more complicated house. Like I just finished one in Sugar House. It's awesome, rearranging the floor plan, all that kind of stuff. But really we are just like burn and turn, cosmetic. Maybe finishing a basement was a big deal, but most of them were just cosmetic. A lot of meth houses.
Gotta love it.
Very nice.
And I'd say 80%, wholesaling didn't even exist back then. There were guys that would hit then the guys at the trustee sales, it was like the hugest crowd. There were 30, 40 people down there bidding on these auctions because there were so many. Man. You'd have 20 houses going every other day down at the courthouses.
Jeez.
So those were the wholesalers back then. They'd buy at the trustee sale and then sell.
Oh.
And homeowners didn't have equity. So it was like, or short sales. I think the wholesalers of today were the short sales of back then, where they would market direct to seller to try to get the short sale listing. And so I bought a lot on short sales and a lot on banks. And the other kind of note is I would say of all those, call it 80% of the house I bought were from bank-owned agents. I bet you over half I was not the original first place offer. Someone always fell out, and then you get good relationships with the bank agents, and they'd be like, just call Matt, he's going to close.
That's cool.
And so sometimes you'd even get it for less than what your original offer, because you guys see it over time, sellers get beat up. And if even in the bank could be a seller and they're like, freak, just if he'll perform, we need to get it off our books. Just go for it.
That's awesome.
Totally.
Yeah,
No,
it's
and
good.
I feel like times have changed. That's for sure, and that's awesome to hear because I feel like a lot of people, even just this last year or two, as rates went up, a lot of people started losing a lot of money. A lot of people saw that negative aspect of real estate because we started back in 2019 and it was easy, and it was easy for those first 2 or 3 years, and then a couple of years ago as rates started to go up, got harder and harder, and we started losing money on flips. And it's good to see that, having a positive outlook on your situation and what you're going through and just tweaking what you're doing can be the difference between losing something at foreclosure or property to doing your best years, right?
Yeah, and I still love it, and I'm still learning about it because not that you want to be reckless or make believe, but I think the more you can lean into the world is such in abundance. There's so many houses out there. There's so many deals out there for you and for me. We don't need we can collaborate. Sure, maybe we're competitive on some things, but there's so many opportunities. There's so many ways to win. Even if it looks like you might be losing, you just got to recalibrate and have a different, more abundant mindset. And obviously then you got to work your butt off and have a plan and be efficient and whatever. But there's no reason anyone can't win in real estate long-term. Now that doesn't mean you're going to win every day. You might go backwards a little bit, but that abundant mindset, I think, is so huge, and your willingness to learn from others. I didn't do that for a lot of years. I was just kind of siloed. I'll figure it out, and then all things really took off for me maybe 7 or 8. Well, really when I went and did the MRED 10 years ago, that was like kind of a wake up call for me. And, I need to network with more people, so it's exciting because it's like, well, hey, what's next?
Absolutely. It reminds me of a couple things, and this is a common trait I feel like amongst successful people. And I'm going to say the analogy wrong, so correct me. But it's, when you're skiing, do you ski? Mm-hmm. And you're going through a forest, like you're not focused on the trees, right? You're focused ahead of you. You're focused where you're going. And the analogy that they bring back to that with business is you have all these obstacles coming up. You don't focus on them. You keep the end goal in mind, right? And as long as you do that and you stay true and you keep working and have that mindset, that positive mindset, you just make your way through. I mean, it's not as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
But the idea, you could have just wallowed in this and that, just like you were saying, and maybe fell back to live a life that you wouldn't want or be proud of. But you were like, no, we're going to keep going. Came from a supportive partner, and a belief in yourself to just don't give up.
And then also to go to your analogy is I didn't realize maybe I needed a guide that had already gone that same path.
That's a great point.
And so I've since have a lot of new mentors, and I know we were talking at lunch, you guys have joined some different masterminds or groups. And so there's a couple that I go to now. And one of the coolest things is I end up becoming pretty close and friendly with I'm in groups where there's 70 and 80-year-olds, but also 20-year-olds. So it's so great to always be networking with a diverse group of people because you learn so much if you're humble enough. Obviously the people that are older, it's they're a good trail guide because it's
Yeah.
Don't go down that mountain right now, and then you get so much excitement and enthusiasm from even working with you guys. It's oh man, they're cold calling. I've never done that. This is so cool to learn and see the different skills from people that are younger than you.
Sure.
So you can get inspiration from anywhere, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the last thought was just connections. It sounds silly, maybe when you first think about it, or I had first thought that, we're getting into this world of entrepreneurship and everybody is connections and network and this. And it's okay, I get that that's important, but whoa, people are putting a lot of emphasis on it. And then you actually start doing that and put forth a lot of effort with it. And the people that we met at that mastermind, a handful of them, I was oh my gosh, I need these people in my circle now.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And and then I think about all the people that are like that just out there that you've never heard of. They're not big on social media. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. And to be able to like have their phone number and just text them about a thought or a problem or a question, a concern. And then to see the doors that, will open. And I've thought like, I'm like a couple people away from like some really cool people, if I could like keep making these connections.
You guys probably will continue to think like this. And I think like this even today, but it's like, you got to remember too, like you're actually a really cool person that someone like I have in my phone book. You know what I mean?
Sure,
it's like,
sure.
And so, but you're exactly right. Cause it's that another tired phrase, but your net worth really is your network.
100%.
And that's it.
Yep.
That's it. Real estate. Yeah. There's fundamentals of buying low, selling high, the value add, whatever, but it's all people. All those flips that I was able to purchase is because I had a good relationship with the agent. Obviously my offer made sense. I'm able to raise money for my hard money because my investors, we end up knowing and liking and trusting each other. We can have cool conversations about life, but the vehicle that we kind of have a relationship around is about the hard money or borrowers. It's like you meet so many cool people and you learn so much, and it's all people, but maybe the hard money is one component. It's just like a widget, a thing or whatever. And everyone needs to make money. That's part of, but it's all about relationships, how you treat other people and how, and also what you accept, like it's okay to say no. It's okay to fire an investor. It's okay to tell a borrower you're not going to lend to him again,
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
Well, let's dive more into that on the hard money aspect of things. Cause that's, like you said, that's kind of your bread and butter right now, your main source of income. Let's talk about what you're doing now. And then let's talk as well and this is one of the main reasons why we wanted to bring you on is you're the biggest hard money lender we know personally. And, there's a lot of people on this or, watching this that they might not want to do the fix and flip.
Yep.
But they might have some money or know people have money and think, man, I could actually get into this hard money lending space, or it intrigues them, So let's talk about how somebody might be able to enter that space and what they could expect.
Yeah. So you can definitely lose your shirt doing anything in real estate if you're not careful. So, and this probably could be like a 3 or 4 hour deep dive. So maybe I'll just try to touch on some highlights. Like, so if I'm raising money or if I have money that I want to put into a deal, like we don't want to lose it, right? Like at a minimum, we want to get our principal back.
Totally.
Not only that, but we'd really like to make some interest. So how do you do that? I mean, the basics of how to do it. And the other thing that's kind of cool, you probably noticed this in wholesaling or flipping is, just because you say you're a bank or a hard money lender, the way you actually, like you're borrowing money and you're lending money, that's the constant. Like, I'm going to loan you $1, Bridger's going to loan you $1. But the way that you repay or deal with that dollar between me and Bridger could be completely different. Maybe I require you to make payments. Maybe Bridger doesn't. Maybe Bridger's calling you every day for an update and I don't. Maybe Bridger's putting unrealistic threats on you or vice versa. Right. Or a bank, when you're applying for a loan, they want this and this and this, but this other bank doesn't want this and this and this. But so the dollar is the dollar, but it's like how you handle it and analyze it. It's going to be different for everybody, so going back to some of the basics, we will every once in a while do a second lien position, but I think to be consistently, safe and have an ongoing operation, you've got to be lending in first lien position.
And what, for those who don't know, what is that?
So you have the priority lien on the collateral. So say you're buying a house for $200,000, I would be in first lien position, meaning if you don't pay me back, I can foreclose and take the house back and deal with myself. So second lien would be, say you're behind my loan and that you still have to worry about my loan as well. So it's riskier. Anything other, I guess, just keep it simple. Anything outside of first lien position is risky. So not that you can't lend in second position, but your question is if you're getting started first, don't lend rehab money. I mean, now probably people are listening to it going, well, I loaned money and I got it all back. And it's like, well, yeah, but that was in 2020 when no one could go wrong. I see so many people losing down payment money, what people call gap lending or the equity or the rehab money, or even just simply a second mortgage on the property. Those are the most vulnerable because you have the least amount of control. Having a first lien position gives you the most control, secondary to actually owning the house. Then you want to understand the collateral. What we're lending on when we do hard money is the collateral and the value, the current value of the property and what the property could be worth after the value add's done. So you've got to look at it that way too. So if you're going to be lending and actively lending in hard money, you got to understand the real estate market. That's why I benefited from flipping for so many years, because whether I knew it or not, I was becoming kind of an expert in values in specific neighborhoods. And then it was so much easier to lend going, well, I'd buy it for that loan amount. Why wouldn't we lend at that loan amount? Plus someone else 90% of the time is going to do all the work, and then we're just going to get paid back. So then the challenge with hard money is raising enough to fulfill the demand, if that's what you want to do. And then you got to make sure you have a team or a process to document things correctly. 90% of the time, I could do a loan to you guys with a crayon and a paper saying you're borrowing, but you got to protect yourself for those few times when things don't go to plan, which over time, they're not going to go to plan on everything. So we always have our borrowers sign a pretty complete loan package that would make sure that we are in first lien position. So in Utah, we use a deed of trust. We get a promissory note signed. We get a personal guarantee. We have all the proper disclosures. We make sure they have hazard insurance in case the place burned down. So then if you've done your job to underwrite that you're loaning at a value that makes sense for the risk, I mean, really, you have a very, very hard time to not at least get your money paid back.
Sure.
Plus interest. That's where I kind of said, and maybe it won't hit home 100%, but if you think about a dollar is not the same dollar depending on who it comes from, because my experience when we referenced back about meeting with that bank president, it made it a lot easier for me, sometimes maybe to a fault, where I can really see the dilemma of someone's project and be like, well, they just need 3 more months. Yeah, they could have done things better, but yeah, they got red tagged by the city. I've been there. Yep. It's delayed in 3 months. So could we foreclose? Yeah, we could. But what do we really want? We want our loan paid back. So I actually think in order to get our loan paid back, this person that's in default that hasn't paid us back, we actually maybe should loan them more money so they can finish the project so I don't have to, Yep. And so you got to just be aware. And then if you're loaning money or borrowing money from other people before you repackage it and send it, you really got to have that conversation and understand what their expectations are and make sure you guys are in alignment. If a lot of my loans were backed by, say, like a bank line of credit, we're not having this conversation because I'm probably out of business.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I don't require my borrowers to make payments. Yeah. And if things get tough, nobody's making payments. Yep. And then if they're not paying payments and I've got to service a bank line, I'm not making payments. Yeah. All of a sudden, the game's over, So just, I always like to say, just think about like, where is that money coming from and that relationship with the money and how it's communicated. And at the end of the day, what I boil it down to is very simple. Like I said, if we have good collateral and we're at a good loan to value and we can have a longer timeline, we are never, ever, ever going to lose money if we're just a little patient and we want to think outside the box to unwind something. Yeah. But that's not going to happen. That's not happening that often. And so if you're out there and you have money, don't be afraid to lend it because it's a great way to do it. Just make sure you're thinking through the best way to protect yourself. And then ask that question, what is it we really want? Well, we want our money back. Okay. Well, then what's the safest way to get that money back? You got to have people sign agreements. You got to be very aware. Now, I've done seconds when we have really, really good collateral. Sure. And my combined loan to value is still really good. And it's for a borrower that I probably have worked with before that I can understand their situation. Yeah.
Yeah. How many, this might be a big question. How many people have you borrowed from to loan on? Have you ever added it up? Is it 50, 100, 200?
No,
and how many
it's not
people?
that many.
I was just going to say, going back to that, I feel like a lot of people don't realize that you can borrow money from people to loan it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You got to be careful. There's probably, again, the way people raise money and the structure that they raise it under could be completely different. So what I'm saying might not make sense if you're syndicating or doing a fund or something like that.
Yeah.
I've always done what's called I call it one-off trust deed investing. And my way that I've raised money is just from existing relationships that then refer me to other people, or they just end up having more and more money that they'll put into the operation. So your question, I bet I've had 25 unique investors over the years that have funded almost at this point 1,400 loans. And I've just been super lucky because the core of them started with me, and it's just kind of
Just keeps going.
it just keeps going. And then they'll refer people over. And a lot of guys tell me that I'm just their base hit. Like they probably have a lot more money, but you know, we have really good deal flow. So it's like they're just clipping coupons, you know? And so I pay my guys between 9 and 10%, just kind of depending on, you know, when they came in or what level of risk they're willing to assume or whatever. But, you know, so call it 9%, you know, for the bulk of them. And then their expectation is that's the rate of return they get. But again, this is the story that we've all agreed to. It could be it could be anything. It could be anything you agree to. You could split points. You could do whatever. Or I know some guys that have their money at like 6 or 7, and I'm like, how in the world did you do that? You know. But there's also when you say not every dollar is the same. I feel like we pay our guys pretty good given their risk level, like never losing money, you know, always being in a good spot, really good deal flow. They don't have to hunt for it. I do all the work to package it, manage the relationship of the borrower, that kind of thing. And so there's that threshold where it's like they're getting enough and you're getting it for a good enough price where it can work to be a business, and they're not out looking for a better option. Like I think sometimes if you borrow it low enough from private people, at some point they're going to go, well, I'm just going to do this myself. Yeah. Or someone else will pay me a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So I've always looked at it as like the long game, where it's like, does this work for you? Because obviously I want to make money too. Yeah. And it's that fine line. It can't be low enough that over a deal or two, they're going to get disinterested. And it can't be too much where you actually can't charge enough to actually have it be worth your time, you know? And so, yeah. So right now I bet I have about 13 or 14 different unique investors.
And at lunch you mentioned you have 110 or so loans?
Yeah, that's usually about it. Like 110 unique loans.
How much money is that total?
It's usually about around 50 million.
That's awesome.
So again, everyone could do this slightly different. How I structure it in a simple way is everybody's interests are aligned in a deal. My investor puts in the bulk of the money. I put in a small chunk. The borrower's putting in a down payment, and the borrower's putting in the rehab money. So it's like there's layers of protection, and we ultimately have the biggest protection because we're insulated between a down payment, usually a really good purchase price on a property that has a lot more value that could be created. And I usually end up at about 65 to 70% of the remodeled value versus my final loan payoff amount. So it's really, I mean, if you're at 65, 7% on a remodeled asset,
a no-brainer.
The worst case scenario is you get paid back.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, the best case is, and then again, that's where I say a dollar's not a dollar. My mentality is not loan to own. Like if you guys fumble on a few deals, yeah, maybe we'll charge an extension fee, but like my note rate says if you're in default after 6 months, it's 28% default rate of interest. I see hard money lenders charge that stuff all the time. And I love that they're there because I'd say last year there was a stretch where most of my loans were just refinances of other hard money lenders that were charging so much on extension fees for otherwise really, really good borrowers. And I'm like, I'd rather do 20 loans with this guy that knows how to do things that just might take a little bit longer than one and destroy him. But I wouldn't have that flexibility if I was borrowing money. So I don't judge these other lenders because if they're borrowing from a bank line or a hedge fund, dude, they got someone breathing down their neck.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
And they're forced to do that. So where you raise your money and the story you tell, like rule number 1 is never lose your investors' money. And then my second rule is like, just make it as easy as possible to work with. Why make it hard to work with somebody? Like why, you know, like you want to protect yourself, you got to underwrite the deal, but I don't need to have you guys do all these extra hoops that don't matter. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of times you go through that because maybe the person's not that organized or they don't know really how to run their business. And so, I mean, if you're ever getting a hard money lender and they can't give you a firm answer and it's like on a fix and flip and it's taken weeks, they're not legitimate.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that makes sense. Yeah. And I feel like that's where building those relationships with whether you're, you know, the borrower or the investor, that's just crucial to being able to do this business. Because there's been times with Ethan and I where we've had loans out with you where we lost a ton of money on them, but we paid you back. You know what I mean? Knowing that one day we're going to need more money from you. And so it's, you know, there are people who don't value those relationships where it's just like, no, you just keep everybody happy and it all pays off in the end.
It does long term. Like we haven't had very many, but there's been handfuls of times where based on our agreement with my investor, I probably should have like said, you're sharing in the loss on this one.
Sure.
But don't ever do that. They're so great. It's like, not that you're not going to be transparent. Like I told them, I said, hey, this is when we took a haircut. Like I took a haircut on my end, but you still got paid back everything. Why? For what the reason you just said. Cause like, I want it to be a good experience, like a true good experience. And then when I need more money, it's so much easier because they have the confidence that it's like, oh yeah, it's going to work out. And just like with you guys, it's like, yeah, you got another one. Great. Let's do it. I don't care that you lost on a few. I mean, I do care that you lost, you know what I mean? But you know,
absolutely. Yeah. I feel like we could keep you here forever, man. And just like, there's so
fun.
many
You
things
get into this and it's like,
and it goes quick. We
a mile wide.
Yeah, for sure. I know we just have a few minutes. Maybe briefly touch on a really cool project you have going on with your software, and then maybe we can transition to a quick close here.
Yeah, you bet. So over the years, you'll see too, as you free up time because you get kind of good at delegating. Like we were talking, I love my team right now for flipping because I don't really have to be that involved because we've kind of got it templated, tried and true recipe. Even the lending still involves a lot of time, but over time we've developed different systems and processes. And one of those was about 3 years ago with three other guys. We started a SaaS business. We're on the front end of the commercial loan application process. The company's called My Sherpas. And it's, think of like we're the Sherpa carrying you and between the borrower, the lender, your loan packet to the top of the mountain, you know, to get it funded. Mm-hmm. So if anyone's applied for, especially like an SBA loan or a commercial loan, the information that's required, all the documents, the repetitive forms, the needs list, the checklist, those are all like in a smart, organized way on this new app or platform. And so it's been really, really cool to see because we've got a product now that I've been using in my lending to onboard borrowers. And now right now we have a lot of SBA lenders that are using it. And so it's just so cool to see something that was on a whiteboard 3 years ago with no money raised. We raised $5 million to start it. And we have legit customers now, and it's starting to get momentum and take traction. And so,
that's awesome. So
I guess my point is like you free up time, and your life's like a vacuum. It's like, oh, well, what else now is going to occupy my time? And I'm like, oh, well, let's do this, you know? Yep. So at times I need to get better now about saying no to things because otherwise there's so many good opportunities. It's just like over time you'll see, well, what are the best ones? Because you're more conscious of like your time that you have available for yourself, your family, your work.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, so that's one cool project. I don't think I'll ever stop flipping or doing the hard money because I love it. It's fun, you know, and it's fun because you meet so many cool people. Like if I wasn't doing lending, I'd never meet you guys. Yeah, sure. We never would have bought the Pocatello deal together. Yep. The only other thing really quick, and it might be a follow-up podcast for you guys with another guest, is after you've owned a lot of these rentals for a while, what I'm starting to notice is I've benefited from owning them long enough that the equity that I have there versus the rents that I'm getting, my return on that equity that I can't use is garbage. Yep. So I'm now strategically trying to sell some of my rentals, and I luck out because I have the benefit of a really good money-making opportunity in the hard money. So I'm actually considering just liquidating some of my rentals that the equity isn't there to make sense and plowing more money of my own into the hard money instead of buying other real estate.
Yeah. Interesting. That's a good angle. I hadn't thought about something like that.
But it's changed. Like I did not think that way 3 years ago. And so I think it's always good to be checking in, you know, to see what's the highest and best use of your time, your interest, your curiosity, and your money.
Yeah.
Last thing here. I think I mean, again, time just flies. So we'll get Matt back out sometime for sure. But let's end with 3 book recommendations that have changed your perspective, real estate or not.
I like to think I'm always reading 1 or 2 books, and a lot of times I'll listen to them on Audible, but I've come back to reading because I think there's some power in actually reading it. So I'll give you kind of some of the last 3. There's a really good book, Wake Up and Live. I think it was written like the 50s or 60s. The author's name is Dorothy Brand. And that's just good for like her version of mindset, abundance, thinking, wake up and live, like wake up and believe in yourself. There's a really good one called Talking on Eggshells. The author's name is Sam Horn, about how to have conversations with yourself and with others, different way to phrase words. And then I can't say I'm done with it, but I'm a little over halfway done with it. A book by Ken Honda, The Japanese Art of Being at Peace with Your Money.
Cool.
That one is so good because it helps you realize that, just everyone has a different relationship with money, and the quicker you can get a good relationship with your money, the better off you're going to be. It's already helped me think through of like, oh, maybe enough is enough.
Sure.
Or you got to look at it differently. So those 3 books right now I'm reading, and there's so many others I could recommend, but those are the 3 most recent.
That's awesome. No,
I've never heard of those.
Yeah, no.
Actually,
I was going to say, I don't think I've heard of a single one of those. So that's great. We'll have to get those.
Yeah, you'll have to look them up.
We'll get them in the show notes so you guys can check them out. Any last words for the audience? Anything, any sort of inspiration you want to
I just say, I mean, I know it kind of sounds corny and whatever, but I think it's so true. Whatever you believe you can do, you can do. You may not get there immediately, but you're 18, you want to start flipping houses, start learning how to do it, come network with other people. Real estate guys are very giving. They're always willing to give back, I think. And if that person isn't willing to give back, they're probably not the right person to talk to anyway. I mean, you need to be respectful of people's times. And then just like even if you're younger or if you're older, the world's so big, it's so abundant, get the tools that you need if you don't have them, learn from others, give back, be of service, and hopefully you're having fun doing it. But there's nothing, we were talking at lunch about how you guys are getting into syndicating, and like whatever numbers you were talking about your mentors or whatever, you guys will probably double that. And it'll be like, oh, well, that was because you guys are doers, you know what I mean? So it's like, be a doer, be willing to fail, be willing to screw up, because I hope I don't make the same mistake twice, but you're pretty excited when you make a mistake because you're like, oh, well, that's not the way to do it.
Yep.
At least I know not to do it that way.
One step closer.
Yeah,
right?
one step closer.
Yep.
So you're always one step closer. We'll end with that.
Cool. Well, thanks, Matt. We appreciate you being here and taking time out of your day to come and talk with us. And we will see you guys next time. And we are looking forward to having more interviews just like this with Matt.
Awesome. Keep it up.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool.